Welcome back, WW Flycorvair. Today, a table full of Corvair flight engines. We have a mixture of everything here, and we're going to go over and give a quick review. The engines on the table represent a lot of different years of production, and a core motor, and a current engine, and a whole bunch of details. I bring this up because almost all the engines that came in here came in from our last tour. Some of them are trade-ins for 3.3 liter builds, a popular choice today. Other ones are engines that came as second-hand items on projects. Probably all of them need a lot more work than people were thinking. We can correct these problems here, but I just want to give a quick overview of some of the ideas here to look for if you're looking at a motor, and some tips to pick up for your own engine. Let's take a look first at the core motor right on the corner, right there. Here we see a typical core motor as people buy them. This motor will turn 360 degrees, and it is a late model Corvair. You can tell that by the letter code, which is on the harmonic balancer end of the motor, right there. But right here off the end of my fingertip, come on in there and get a look at that. See how that says 8409? That says that this is a factory forged crank. All Corvairs had forged cranks, but this particular one's a long stroke motor. And this makes it a 1964 to 69 motor. The fact it rolls over, it's a good beginning point. Core motors like this still readily available, $200–300. A good starting point to make a really good engine right here. So that's a greasy core that just came back. If you look at it, cars do different things than we do. If you look at it, this has Champion spark plugs in it. You're never going to fly that combination. Doesn't matter. A motor like this can be rebuilt into something good. Let's take a look at another motor as we come back here. This here is a 2700cc Corvair that I just picked up on our most recent Midwestern tour. The gentleman who had this did a pretty good job putting it together a number of years ago. Kind of a skilled guy. It's got a couple of details wrong with it. I want to show you what they are. The purpose of this engine is it's coming back in because he's now building a Zenith Cruiser, and he would like a 3.3 liter engine. So this engine, rather than tearing it all apart and rebuilding it into a 3.3, which could be done, we're actually going to build him a fresh 3.3 here and have him come and visit. But for right now, this came back, and I said I'll run it on the test stand and give it a once-over and take a good look at it. He was somewhat concerned about reselling it to someone else, but if it comes here and I go through it, it sort of relieves him of the liability and the ethical concerns of being an amateur engine builder selling an engine to somebody else. It also allows the next owner of this engine to feel a lot better knowing that it came here through the mecca of Corvair engine building. Just a couple of details to take a look at on this. Let's take a look at the prop hub. Kind of looks like a gold hub, but it is not. It is a replica of a gold hub that the builder made, one of a kind. Notice it has no pulley groove and cannot run a front alternator on it. It also is natural finish, and all gold prop hubs are gold in color. This does have a very nice Weisman fifth bearing on it, and that's properly installed with all of the details. As I take a look at it, of course, has NGK plugs. I'm going to turn blue in the face before I tell people to stop putting in the wrong spark plug in an airplane motor. So, NGK plug. I had great experience with them on dirt bikes in the 80s. If this doesn't look like a dirt bike engine, don't put an NGK plug in it. A couple other little details. This is a really, really nice job of safety wiring on cylinders right here, and a great job of painting the cylinders. Only problem is, 2700, the stock factory clips hold the baffling on underneath, not safety wire. So all of this safety wire is superfluous to a correctly done job. If we take a look at it, it does have the older style valve cover clamps on it. I think they're just temporaries. I'd like to take a look at that right there. That is a stock head nut right there. We do not use those. Those are pretty junky. They are much lower quality than the factory originals. They're marketed by a lot of different companies, but you do not want to use those. We sell head nuts that are very high quality for a reason. Taking a look at it, it does have very, very nice cylinder heads on it. It's good components. This motor, go through it with a fine-tooth comb, and we'll be able to tell a lot of things about it, get it squared away, give it a lot of test runs, and it'll make somebody a fine basic motor. if we take a look at it, some details that you never see when you look at motors, check that out right there. That's a pinhole straight through a corroded valve cover. I don't think the builder intended to use these, but there are lots of people making mistakes like that out there. Again, wrong cylinder head nuts on there. Some other details. If I swing this baby around and if we take a look right here, if you can get in there, that harmonic balancer right there is nowhere near close enough. We have articles on the website about how a harmonic balancer goes on. It runs about 3/16 of an inch off the timing marks. This isn't in all the way. Part of the reason why it's not in all the way is right there where my finger's touching, that is a seal surface and it has been incorrectly painted to go with the balancer. You can't run paint on seal surfaces right there. So a lot of details like this covered in the SPA assembly manual in great fine detail. So if you're building a motor, you need an SPA assembly manual. Take a look right there underneath my finger. That is one of the 7 mounting bolts that mounts the rear oil case, the HV2000 on there. That bolt right there, like its other 7 brethren, is missing the washer. You do want to have lock washers under there. And as we come down here, let's take a look at this. Normally, you have 2 studs that stick out of here and 2 studs that stick out of here. And you would put thin nuts on there and keep them on there all the time. If you take the nuts off the bottom row here, what happens is you're losing the compression on the bottom of the gasket. Motor like this that does not have pressure on here all the time, where you would have space on the end of the studs for the intake manifold or the rear alternator bracket. But if you keep taking the bolts off or the fasteners, this would need to have studs installed. If you keep taking them off, you lose the crush on the gasket back here, and particularly in a tail dragger, you're going to develop an oil leak right there at the base of the rear cover and the case. Obviously something you really want to avoid. Other than that, this motor has a couple of details with it that need to be adjusted. This is a day or two's work and a day or two in the shop, giving a test run and going over some details. Again, the owner of this has sent it in as a trade-in on a 3.3 liter, but this particular motor I consider reworkable. None of these details you want to ignore if you're going flying. If your own engine has some of these details, make sure you get them corrected before you send them out there. If you don't know about this stuff, pick up some more information, watch some more videos, or come to one of our Corvair colleges and get training on this. If you got a motor like this and you're not really sure about it, always welcome to make an appointment to come down to my hangar and have me check it out with you. We do test runs and private sessions on motors all the time. The rates for it are pretty modest compared to making a mistake with your motor. Let's move on and take a look at the next engine in the collection. Right here, we have a 3 liter that we just picked up. This 3 liter was started a number of years ago by a real nice builder that we know in Texas. He brought it to the last event and asked me to give it a test run. Man is to be admired. He's a particularly tough guy, faced a lot of challenges, but in recent years. But I said to him, I'm going to take that home and you're going to come visit and we're going to have a one-on-one session. When we set it up on the stand to run it, I got a good look at a lot of stuff, and although we could have run it there, part of the reason why people work with me is it's not just because they like Corvairs or the parts. The best deal you're getting is on my judgment. And I looked at it and said, might be a little bit of a trip for him to make his way out to my place, whatever it is, but I'm not running the engine for him and sending him home with it kind of okay. Couple of details. He was a little bit out of the loop in recent years, like I say, for family reasons, but he's getting back into it. And for him to get back into it, there's some updates required. Now, this is an older style starter right here. Nothing wrong with these. Lots of planes still have them. These are good. So when I say an update, just because we have a newer model starter doesn't mean you update the starter. When I talk about updates, what I'm talking about is R44F plugs. We've told people not to use these anymore for the last 4 or 5 years. Our MOP manual, the Maintenance Operations and Procedures, is the latest document, but for years we've been telling people that it's Denso plugs. On the 3 liter, you're using a heat range 22 Denso plug. On a 2700, a heat range 20 Denso plug. And on a 3.3 liter, it's a 24. But AC44s worked for years, but this is an obsolete plug on Corvairs and not to be flown anymore. We still see a lot of these popping up. Let's take a look at some other details that we're going to go over here. Right here off the end of my fingertip, that's an acorn nut right there on the end of a stud. Not to be used. Acorn nuts are not hard enough. We use grade 8 and grade 9 fasteners on there, and you don't know that that can handle the torque value. A lot of acorn nuts and cheap hardware like that all come out of the People's Republic of China, where I will assure you the Communist Party of China does not care about United States aircraft builders and quality control on their home-built airplanes. So, right there, we're going to take all the hardware off the heads. Now, does this mean a major rebuild? We're going to give this engine a good look-see. It'll get whatever it needs. But the object of bringing this engine in is to make sure that when this guy bolts it on the front end of his engine Zenith next spring, that he has a solid engine that was proven. If it takes a little bit of extra effort, we're willing to put it in. I don't want to see stuff like this flying on airplanes. There's a lot of other details on it that we can come around the back and take a look. Here's a safety wire job. Now this is an early set of 3-liter cylinders, and it does require safety wire, but that's not safety wired tight enough. Safety wire has to pull the baffling up very, very tight on the cylinders. That's only early model 3 liters. Current 3-liter kits being sold by SPA have the cylinders machined to take the stock clips. But for a number of years, the cylinders required safety wiring. But the safety wire really has to pull it up. If the baffling is loose, it's going to sit on the pushrod tubes. And if it sits on the pushrod tubes and vibrates long enough, you're going to have trouble. So, got to be a little tighter if you got a 3-liter kit. My own personal 3-liter has safety wiring on the cylinders, and they are uptight, and it works great. We have about 10 years worth of those. But like I say, current 3-liter kits and 3.3s from SPA use the stock clips on the bottom of the engine. As we take a look at this, I can take a quick glance at anybody's motor and tell a lot about it. Let's have a quick look and see right here. There is no gasket sealer on that gasket. And we do specify gasket sealer on those. You can come over here and take a look right here. You see that gasket right there? See the point on the tip of that gasket? That is not actually a gasket. That's a homemade gasket under there, and that has copper spray on it, which we no longer use. You would never use a homemade gasket in this position, particularly a poorly made one with the wrong stuff on it. And I'll tell you why. The perimeter, not in this zone right here, but the perimeter around this is under full engine oil pressure, up to 60 psi, across an 1/8 inch wide sealing surface. You do not monkey around with incorrect homemade gaskets just because you didn't have one that day or the wrong sealer, because this has to stay clamped down to keep the oil pressure inside. No kidding, a pressure oil leak on a motor is going to empty the engine out in a couple of minutes. So you don't fool around with gaskets like that. Doesn't matter that it's a Corvair, Continental, Lycoming, everything's all the same on this. Let's take a look around here. See that washer? When we sell the gold oil filter housing, the kit comes with very specific washers, and that's not them. Right there, if you take a look right off the end of my fingernail, there's a radius right there. And that requires a high collar lock washer that we send with the piece. And this does not have those washers on it. If you need them, you get them from us. But that washer is riding up on the side of that radius. Will it hold the oil in? I'm sure it will. Is it right? No, absolutely not. And details matter. So this stuff of the wrong gasket, the wrong sealer, no sealer, the wrong washer, details like this matter. Everybody's always concerned, will the crank break in the motor? Don't worry so much about the crank. Worry a lot more about details like this and baffling that you're going to miss. Now again, all you have to do is ask for help, and we're here to support. I'm not here criticizing the guy. I understand what gets in people's lives. It's a training challenge for me. I really want people to learn this stuff in detail. I'll show it to you in person if we have to. But what we're not going to do is support people taking stuff out here and leading to engine problems, bad performance, or anybody getting hurt. None of it's worth it. We're supposed to be having fun here. Let's come on around this side and take a look. As we take a look at this, study this really close. Those are the fittings to and from the oil cooler. This is a gold sandwich adapter right here. All this stuff is right, other than the fact that for a Zenith, this has to be on the other side of the motor, and we'll go over details like that. But take a look at that right there. That is PTFE sealant on an AN fitting. Okay, you can feel it. It's a little crumbly. Has no business whatsoever. No AN fitting right there with a bevel to seal it gets anything on the fastener. If you want to put a tiny bit of oil right on there so that the threads screw down with the hose end, good. But you never put sealer on there. You don't put sealer, it doesn't seal on the threads, it seals on the 37-degree face. This is a basic hardware issue. It's one of my gripes against EAA publications and other magazines where they forget the fundamentals like this and they spend all their time on glass cockpits, but people don't know how to put an AN fitting in because we don't go over details like this. We don't talk about hardware enough in the general industry. However, I do talk about hardware because that's what reliability is made out of. That's also what being a knowledgeable guy about your airplane is. You're going to hold a repairman's certificate for this airplane. You better darn well know something about it. And that's not how a hose goes on. Don't know that? I don't hold you responsible for not knowing it. Our industry has done a poor job of explaining things like that. However, once I make you aware of it, I'm going to hold you responsible for knowing it now. All right? So no sealer on an AN fitting like that. The other end of this fitting, right in there, that gets a product called fuel lube on it, and it is not on there. Fuel lube goes into that side of it because that side is a 3/8 inch NPT pipe thread. But on this side, nothing. Let's take a look down here again. This has all the factory studs in it, but the dilemma is builder has taken all the fasteners off. It has lost the tension on it. So before this engine actually goes flying, I'm going to pull the balancer, pull all the stuff off the back, and go after the gasket right there and properly seal it. Again, not the end of the world, not a giant issue unless you want to take it flying. Let's come on around here and take a look right there. That is a 2800 series block-off plate. We have much nicer pieces available than that right there that you can make it at home. But this one is too large on around the perimeter and it's leaning on other parts of the casting and sitting slightly tilted. We have that part in stock. It is not cheap, but either make it correctly or buy one from us. Again, baffling on this side, just sitting there loose, not acceptable. So coming around here and taking a look at other components on it, I think we just stuck the valve cover on. You saw that it had acorn nuts on the other side. On this side, it's got grade 8s. If it's not right for one side, it's not right for the other. You need grade 8 nuts and washers. Again, we have kits of these things if you don't have the right ones. The basic motor, made out of really good stuff. Not a problem with the basic motor. Needs a day or two to get straightened out here. I've invited the builder here. We're going to straighten it out. We're going to test run. It's going to go home and it's going to be ready to serve him next spring. But as it was, I'm not running this and giving him a false sense of confidence in it. Again, the real value of working with me is my judgment. It's not, the parts are a good value. A lot of the Corvairs are a good value, but if you decline to accept my judgment on how to build and operate aircraft engines, you're cheating yourself out of the best deal you can get. Let's come on down and take a look at the next engine right here. This here is a 2700. This was built about 15 years ago. It was updated with a Weisman fifth bearing. You can take a look at this right here. This is the SBA fifth bearing, but it's a real early one. It is actually a casting. Works just as well as the recent ones. So the builder who originally worked on this before it was sold to the current owner was interested in updating it. So if we take a look at it, he did update and do some good things along the way. but there are plenty of things about this specific configuration that I would not use. Let's take a quick look. We use welded on head pipes. As a general rule, yes. They go with everything. If you want to use one of our cowlings, we're counting on welded on head pipes. Do I support this type of build? Yeah, you can do it, but it's not particularly my favorite. If you look at this, this has grade 5 head nuts. They cannot be torqued properly, and they do not have washers underneath. Take that back, that does have a washer underneath, but still it's a grade 5. You'd pop that head nut off with enough torque on it properly if it was a lubricated nut. As we take a look at it, it has spark plugs. I don't think anybody's worked on this engine since we did the update, but that's a 44F, not going flying with that plug. The quality of the basic build is pretty good, but let's go over some things. Right here, this is an original folded fin oil cooler from a Corvair. This would have appeared on a like an early model turbo Corvair. They worked and some people flew them, but I'm not a fan of doing that stuff, and this would never support a modern STOL aircraft. A really fast aircraft you might get away with, but a STOL airplane, the slower it flies, the bigger the oil cooler. And you could not fly this successfully and relentlessly on a Zenith 750. Your cooling has to be a balance. If you've got one of our new STOL nose bowls, you need to have a commiserate cooler, like a larger style cooler. Now let's take a look at the alternator right here. This is a 45 amp alternator run off the belt in the back. I've said to people, never, ever, ever, ever do this. The reason why isn't because it's a terrible idea. But if you look at how this belt travels and it's driven off the other side of the balancer over here, you fray that balancer off, there's your ignition wires right there. If you think that that's an imaginary issue, good friend of mine, EAA chapter president of 288 Spruce Creek in the 1990s in Florida, good guy, John Blackburn, excellent engineer, had a Ford V6 engine in a Mustang 2 with tricycle gear. Lost a belt in the back of his Ford V6, knocked the ignition lead off the top of the distributor, had a forced landing on the golf course at Spruce Creek. He did not survive that. So if you want, again, to use some of my experience, don't put an alternator belt on there. I lost a good friend over that, and there's no reason why anybody else should be doing this sort of stuff. You can run guards and do some other stuff, but again, this was done for 45 amps. Let's say you don't like our front alternator or rear alternator and you want more power. I got news for you. We can run a direct drive alternator in the back and one in the front. We have builders doing it. It actually weighs less and makes more power than this, and obviously is redundant where this is not. This is a stock Corvair setup right here. This is the stock filter, and that allows you to use an electric pressure gauge to tell the pressure inside the filter. All of that stuff is okay for cars, but let's go back to the idea of there's a lot of merit to working with a gold system, in the gold system where everybody measures temperature and pressure at the same location. This motor has a temperature probe in the bottom of the pan, but that won't read the same as anybody else who has a gold oil system, and I don't know where the pan, comparative data on it. Again, a couple of things I wouldn't do. A nylon stopper in oil right there, not, in the old fuel pump boss. Would it work? Sure, I'd probably do it in a car, but never in an airplane. Brass fittings like this, you look at it, it's a hard 90T going to the line feeding the fifth bearing. Really cold conditions, that's probably not flowing nearly as much as you would think. Also, right there is a temperature probe, and that temperature probe is going to be threaded partially into there, and it's going to be obscuring some of the oil flow through there. So not really the ideal location for that. We can take a look back over here. This is a distributor. It's an old dual point style one. I can actually tell you that I made it. That rivet put in there was a sign of compliance with an update that we had. And the last rivet that I put in was about 2004. So this is a pretty old animal right here. Again, the crimps on here are gas station variety. That's not how you crimp an electrical wire on an airplane. I understand that people got away with some of this stuff. If you got an old dual point style distributor like this in your airplane, you call me up and we're going to get you squared away with an EP or an EPX. They're just fantastically better than this. So let's move on and take a look, some stuff up here on the front of the motor that I want to show people. If you look at this straight in from the side, take a look at the starter. It's actually angled nose down. That is actually not aligned on the motor at all, and that would chew the heck out of the teeth right there. Part of the thing is, take a look at how it's jacked up on a bracket that's bolted through the top cover. That's a guaranteed oil leak right there. None of our tail brackets ever bolted through the top cover. He's got some kind of gasket on there, but that's not really how it's done. So there are older style starters done correctly, and this is not one of them. So this type of starter would have to get reworked and an update. Let's come around to the front here and take a look at it. This has an older style spoked ring gear. This was the old FRA 235 style. These actually worked. They used to come with a stamping on them right there. This one is blended, and I can run my finger over that and not get cut. This guy did a good job and blended out all those edges like we told people to. Other people just put them on without them stamped, and if I ran my finger over it like that, I would need stitches. That type of really sharp edge, where nobody blended it out, was the source of cracking on these. Never brought an airplane down, but you don't really want to have a cracked ring gear. When I couldn't get people all to do that, they put the FRA 235 out of production. It used to be a Ford Taurus part. We have a new updated ring gear that is a current Ford part that we make that's solid. This is referred to as a spoked ring gear. But just for the sake of getting people all to get the best possible stuff, we sell the ring gear separately. And even if you have a gold system, it's completely retrofittable. Works on either one. So get the updated ring gear. This right here, again, was the source of cracking when that piece was razor sharp and people would not polish it off. Took about an hour to do the job that this guy did. Would have worked perfectly. But again, when we take this motor and I get this straightened out, I'm going to change the starter on this. I'm going to change the ring gear. We're going to have a couple of updates on this. Go over the head nuts, toss them out, bunch of details like that. But a motor like this can be straightened out in 2 or 3 days worth of work. You run it, we can test it. There's solid motors. But again, if you have a motor like this at home, don't fly this type of stuff on it. These details don't take that long to fix compared to building the whole motor. Don't run out-of-date stuff. Don't run unique ideas that don't apply to other stuff. Don't run belts on the back of the motor. Let's come around and take a look at this. Right here, this is a current 3-liter motor right here. Got a couple of little details to go, but this motor's actually set up correctly. This represents an older motor that was updated. When I take a look at it, it has our current starter setup on it, has a lot of details. It has the correct Denso plugs in it. Notice it has one of our properly trimmed plates here. Take a look, all the washers are in place. Take a look at that washer right there. That's a high collar lock washer, and it's not into the radius on the part. You can take a look at all the details on this, and it's correctly assembled. And see that little bit of gray right there? That little bit of gray tells you that there's ultra gray RTV underneath that gasket, just like the SPA assembly manual says so. You can also look at this, and there's ultra gray gasket material on there. Baffling down really, really tight with wire. Very, very solid. So head nuts, correct. All the details on this, little tidbits of stuff, all look good. This right here is set up with an EPX distributor. Do not look at that clamp. That is not how distributors are held down right there. So this is the type of thing that comes in for a little detail fix. We make a distributor clamp and it does not look like that. All right. So take a look though, but the nuts are all in place on this. If I unscrew this, take a look. The shallow nuts, the thin nuts, are holding that down all the time. You want to take the intake manifold on and off right there. That's the nut that you release on there. They function as jam nuts to each other with the intake manifold tab right there. But that part is correct. So let's swing around the front of this and take a look. This is a current production ring gear from us. This one does not have spokes. This is referred to as a solid gear. This is a current 2400L starter. It needs an update for its little grounding link here. We have a separate video about grounding links, and I want you to check that out. But again, this is a fairly solid motor, and I would consider this, with a couple of little hardware updates on it, to be certainly airworthy. We recently test ran this one, and it passed. I just want to have the details done correctly before we release this. So as you take a look at this, this is a collection of motors. I want to emphasize to people that we're here to serve you. If you have a special need for a visit, or you'd like to get a look at motors, or you'd like us to look at yours, or you're thinking about buying a motor, let this be fair warning that not all motors for sale that claim to have been built to my manual actually are. Details matter. Don't buy anything with the assumption that it's perfectly all right inside. Do some due diligence. If you happen to have one of these things, or your motor's not really giving you a good feeling about it, arrange to have a visit or come to a college. It's all about transfer of information that we already have that I want to share with you. So, with that note, I'll sign off. Thanks for stopping by. If you like content like this, make sure you take a moment to subscribe to the channel. We could really use your subscription. Thanks very much, and we'll see you out on the flight line.